Those who refuse the gift of eternal life are condemned to wander in the darkness of eternal night. Coming this fall from SJS Direct. This weekend, I finished binge watching Transformers Siege War for Cybertron. And the reason why I wound up binge watching this show is because it's so exceptionally well done. I felt like I was back in 1984 when I was a kid watching the original Transformers series. Now, your Transformers Siege War for Cybertron is very special because it not only captures the spirit of Generation 1, it expands upon the stories of Generation 1 and makes them fresh for the 21st century. Now, Transformers Siege War for Cybertron takes place on Cybertron in the last days of the Cybertron War before the Autobots left on the Ark to go to Earth. And we see that Cybertron has become a very dark and dreary place, and it's a war-torn planet due to the conflict between the Autobots and the Decepticons. So this story not only expands upon what happened in the original G1 series, showing us those last days of Cybertron in the pilot episode, but it also brings a lot of the story elements that were darker that were introduced in 1986's Transformers the movie and brings them to the forefront, because back in the 80s they didn't really allow people to get that violent. They didn't allow cartoons to get that violent because of the laws that were in place at the time. So this series takes all the gloves off that were taken off with Transformers the movie in 86 and shows us that dark Cybertron and how bad things were in those last days. And while it does that, it puts some fresh spins on some of these characters to give them some development. Like we see in this series, Bumblebee has not really chosen a side in the war. Now, in the first episode of Transformers, Bumblebee was very much an Autobot, but in this series, we get to see him being in between being the scavenger, and that really adds to his character and gives him some layers and depth and complexity. Now, some people don't really like that because they're used to Bumblebee being this bubbly and fun character, but in a war-torn situation, it kind of it would probably fit him more organically, seeing this bubbly, fun person turn into this very dark and cynical person, because people change and war changes them. And this is one of those character developments I could get behind because it is something very organic. Now, Optimus Prime, on the other hand, is very true to his G1 self, holding out hope, holding out faith, and I like seeing that because he's the guy who keeps all of these Autobots together in this struggle. His leadership is the thing that inspires them to continue fighting in this war, and that was something I really liked seeing. And I also really liked a lot of things that they expanded upon as related to G1, especially the relationship between Jetfire and Starscream. If anybody ever remembers the Skyfire episode, they remember that the Skyfire character and Starscream did talk about their relationship in the past, and we started to see how that relationship started to deteriorate in this story. So there were a lot of G1 elements in Siege War for Cybertron, and I really liked seeing all of those elements, like Wheeljack talking about Iacon and him and Bumblebee being there, because that was a key part of that first episode before they left. I like seeing the development of Ratchet and Red Alert and seeing how their viewpoints came, because that was explored in the G1 series. And I like to see all those characters who were G1 characters really having their mythology and lore expanded upon for the 21st century, while staying true to the spirit of the 84 series, but remaining fresh as related to these characters and expanding on them. And I like the world building in Siege War for Cybertron because there was really a lot more world building in these 6 episodes than was ever in the original G1 series or the movie. So there was an excellent job done with the expansion of the world of Cybertron. We really get in there and really start to see how this once great planet was practically torn apart by this war, and how people are on their last legs on both the Autobot and the Decepticon side. And we get to see how this world really has been ravaged by this war. I mean, there are some scenes in there that are very horrifying, seeing how the Decepticons have these dead Autobot bodies hanging up with flags over them. The Decepticons, just being cold to people, and Megatron's just callous view of everything, that he just doesn't care, to the point where he's willing to just compromise his ethics because he wants to win at any cost. And then you see all of the casualties, like on the episode with Ratchet, where all of these bots have suffered as a result of this war, losing limbs. So we get to see, a world that has been expanded upon, because in the Transformers cartoon we never got to see that world, and how badly it was war torn, and how hopeless this whole situation was. And we got to see all of this in depth, because it looks like the creators finally got a chance to really, really build and expand upon this world, showing us the culture of Cybertron, the history of Cybertron, and even the religion of Cybertron, because the Allspark and all of that stuff that was introduced in Beast Wars comes into play here. So we get a very, very wonderful fusion of G1, Beast Wars, the movie, and all of these elements that were great about Transformers in this story. And it really captures that spirit of what really makes the Transformers mythology so great. Now, the one thing that I had an issue with Transformers Siege War for Cybertron is, even with all the great character development and story building, we don't get to see much transforming. I mean, the show is called Transformers, but sadly, we don't get to see much transforming, and we don't get to see many of the bots in their alt modes, because we're so busy developing the stories and the character development. And that's a minor nitpick, but I really would love to see more characters in their alt modes. Unfortunately, sometimes you have to sacrifice something in order to lay the foundation for your stories, lay the foundation for your character development, and lay the foundation for your storyline. And sadly, we had to sacrifice the transforming as a result of this development. But it's a minor nitpick, but I would have liked to have seen more transforming. And another nitpick had to do with the animation. Now, the animation is CGI, but it's not really one of the best elements of it. But I can't really nitpick, because Sunbow's animation back in the day wasn't that great in and of itself, but kids loved watching Transformers, even though there were some inconsistent animation panels as related to the old Transformers series. So I can't really get too mad about the new series not having the greatest CGI animation, because that really, again, captures that spirit of the old Transformers series. And some people have been, nitpicking about the dialogue, but that's par for the course when it comes down to Netflix series. I mean, Netflix series, a lot of times, they look like they were practically second drafts. So I can't get too mad at the producers for having this kind of uneven dialogue. I mean, it looked like some of the scenes did need a little bit of a polish, and they needed a little bit of more refinement, but that's par for the course for Netflix series, because most Netflix series oftentimes are rushed a bit. So I understand what happens with that, and I understand the problems with the voice acting. A lot of people complain about the voice acting, but the voice actors could only do what the directors told them, and I believe the directors were a little bit rushed with these 6 episodes. They wanted to get them out, and that's just par for the course when it comes down to a series like Siege War for Cybertron. It's just like those old Sunbow cartoons that I used to watch back in the 80s. Those old cartoons where they were made on a low budget. They were made to be rushed out real quick. And we get that same type of production value here. So a lot of people were complaining about the animation. They were complaining about the stories, dialogue. But again, this is very similar to '84, and as I see it, there's only room for improvement with this series. If Hasbro hasn't rushed it, they can start working on polishing and refining the dialogue. They can start working with the directing, the voice actors and stuff. That's stuff that can be improved upon, but the foundations of this Siege War for Cybertron are there. The foundations for really good, solid crafted writing are there. And it really expands upon that world and makes it an absolutely fantastic start to this 3-part series. I mean, this is one of the best Transformers series I've seen so far, in spite of the deviations like killing Ultra Magnus and Skywarp. I mean, essential characters in both the movie and in the G1 series. It expands upon everything so much that you don't mind these minor discrepancies from the original G1 series, because it shows us, again, how horrific war is, and it just shows us how this conflict has just practically scarred these robots and really scarred the things about them, and has led to them being who they are. I mean, we just get to see so much richness in terms of character development and the way the story just goes, that you just absolutely are immersed in this world, and it's just an absolutely fantastic series. So I can honestly highly recommend Transformers Siege War for Cybertron. As an old school Transformers fan who has had G1 toys and has collected toys like Transformers alternators and Vinyl Tech, this one I can say really is the closest to G1 and really captures that spirit of G1 while making this mythology fresh for the kids of the 21st century. It's the kind of show that you could sit down as a father or a mother with your son or your daughter to sit down and watch, and you can enjoy it from the perspective of what you grew up with, and you can share it with your children. And that's one of the other fun parts about this series, is that we go from generation to generation, but the story remains the same. And that's like building that mythology that makes these characters, practically turns them from icons into legends. If you want to see me make more review videos and be able to pay for the Netflix to make the review videos, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, or my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. And if you want to try out my SJS Direct fantasy fiction, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, the Spinsterella trilogy, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can find some of them on Smashwords and the iBookstore, and you can also find some on Google Play. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available, paperback and Kindle Unlimited, ISIS, the main event. It's carnage inside of a steel cage when the goddess next door steps in a squared circle with the beast from the boss in this action-packed, all-new ISIS series adventure. Get ISIS, the main event, paperback and Kindle Unlimited today.